Join me and about 20 other Wise Squirrels in Franklin, Tennessee. That's just minutes from Nashville, by the way, on September 19th to the 21st this year. If you want to feel more confident, more connected, learn about new tools and techniques, this is something for us to do together in person, where you can actually meet like-minded people, including expert facilitators, by the way, who will be leading some of the curriculum as well as myself. This is going to be an incredible event, something so rewarding and something I am pumped about. You're going to be surrounded by people who get it, like-minded people, fellow Wise Squirrels, and that's going to make this event that much more impactful for you. So, to keep this event intimate, I'm capping it at 20 tickets. The first 10 are early bird tickets, and those will be discounted, so you'll save $205 on those first 10 tickets. After those 10 tickets are gone, though, we're going to go back up to the regular price. But don't worry, even the regular price is well worth the investment. Grab your ticket today to save, and I'll see you in September. And I promise I will not sing at the retreat, because nobody needs to hear that. See you soon. Welcome to Wise Squirrels, the podcast for late diagnosed adults with ADHD. I'm your host, Dave Delaney. Today, I've got a great episode lined up for you. Before we jump into the interview, I did want to tell you about our sponsor, Inflow, the #1 science-based app to help you manage your ADHD. It's created by ADHD clinicians and psychologists, and their dedicated support system helps you understand your neurodivergent brain, build lifelong skills, and get things done. I've been using the app and I'm loving it. I like how the app asks you simple questions without overwhelming you, and it then walks you through the process of working on specific areas like time management or rejection sensitivity with friendly reminders, lessons, little mini podcast clips. It's a cool app. Do yourself a favor and visit wisesquirrels.com/inflow. Do it now or click the link in the description on the episode. Give it a try and check out their free ADHD traits assessment. It's free and it's right there. You're going to love it. And we thank Inflow for their support of Wise Squirrels.
I am Jess Jarmo, a neurodivergent career coach, and I help people choose the right job. So if they're stuck in their career, or, maybe they've just come out of college and not sure what to do, helping them choose what is the best job for them, as well as finding that right job, and as well as on-the-job support. So things like supporting them with getting off of a performance improvement plan, getting a promotion, or just having better communication with managers, executive functioning support, task management, organization, all that great stuff. And my background, I have an undergrad in early childhood development. I have my MBA, concentration in human resource, and I have over 15 plus years of experience with recruitment and coaching. I'm also neurodivergent, so I'm dyslexic. I am late diagnosed ADHD. My daughter got diagnosed. I got diagnosed.
Yeah, it's amazing, especially nowadays, how many women are discovering they have ADHD, usually when their child or children are diagnosed and they start going through that process. What was that like for you?
It was surreal, because I remember vividly bringing all 3 of my kids to the doctor's office, and they're running around, flickering the lights, running over, like falling off the table. And my doctor, the pediatrician, just looks at me. She's like, "Yeah, they're ADHD." And, also, then it goes into like the attention and the school not being able to, pay attention as much. And, just some of the boxes that they were checking off. I was like, oh, that's why I was having a hard time in my career, or, that's why I couldn't focus or make those connections. So, yeah.
Is that what took you down the path of, like, did you, I'm assuming you perhaps didn't, and I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm assuming you didn't maybe start with a focus on career development and careers for ADHDers. So tell me a little bit about like kind of the course of your career, how it's taken you. You know, I have some guesses at this point, but
Yeah.
keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. So I loved babies and working with kids, and that's really where I wanted to start. And I, I didn't do very well in school. I got accepted to one college, AIC in Springfield, which is a tough neighborhood. But I went there for nursing, and I failed A&P and chemistry, and realized that wasn't for me. I transferred in to another school, Mount Ida in Newton, Massachusetts, and I changed careers to early childhood education, and I absolutely loved working with kids and babies and teaching other people. I just, training and teaching, coaching, like just comes naturally.
Yeah.
But I graduated college and I got a job, which I loved, but I was getting paid like $13 an hour and it wasn't a livable wage.
Yeah.
So I ended up going back for my MBA in human resource. And I really fell in love with recruiting. Like I liked knowing what people were making. I liked having conversations with people on,
Right.
that type of stuff. And, I think that's something I really enjoyed, where the transition from, being a recruiter to career coach was, after um, I had a really great career in recruitment, but it was like, it wasn't doing so well, the recruitment industry. So I had gotten a new job. I didn't really like it that much, got laid off, and realized like I really wanted to help people like myself with ADHD, dyslexia, autism, anxiety, find the right job, because I've had experiences where I've gotten fired.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think, being able to relate to my clients is something that's passionate, and
Yeah.
telling those stories. So I worked with a career coach myself, and figured out what I wanted to do.
What was that process like with the career coach you worked with?
Um, so it was really diving deep into my passion, what I wanted to do. Working as a recruiter, like looking back, I was always coaching people. Even after, like, if I was having this conversation and they weren't qualified, I was telling them after, like, hey, this isn't something I can hire you for, but you can really improve on your interviewing skills with XYZ. And they were so appreciative. And it just gave me a boost of like dopamine. And like, so excited I could help this person, even though
Yeah.
I couldn't move them on to the next stage.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was good for, so I'll get back to your actual question. Working with the career coach, it's great to have accountability partner. It's great to have somebody to bounce ideas off that's non-biased, and working towards goals. So taking those actionable steps rather than just talking about it.
Yeah, and I have coaching clients as well, and absolutely have always loved this, like the process of helping. To your point, I mean, about how we wise squirrels ADHDers tend to love solving problems and in a non-biased way, in a kind way, leading with empathy and so on, and approaching things in that way, I think is and also just from shared experiences and a lot of experience, just life experience and career experience ourselves. I think we bring a lot to the table that way. So I love that you're doing that. Tell me about the process. Like if somebody were to hire you, because I don't usually focus so much on career, more on business growth. But tell me more about that process of, somebody comes to you, they're like, I'm stuck. I don't know which path to go on. Help me kind of figure out, are any of these paths the right one, or is there another one
Yeah.
hidden behind those bushes over there that I should?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So choosing the right job is a lot of, we're talking about non-negotiables, right? So what are the things that are going to make you happy, successful, and breaking them down into smaller steps? So what are the tasks that you enjoy doing every day? Um, and how do we match those up with jobs that you'll enjoy? Um, and, there's going to be challenges in every job, but what are the tools and support that you need around those challenges? And really diving into what are those challenges, because all of us who are neurodivergent, they're all different. You could even take the
Yeah.
same ADHD people or autistic people, and they would have completely different, strengths and challenges. So breaking that down into, non-negotiables, I do an assessment. We have conversations. We do different types of coaching, not just motivational. So I feel like, you don't know what you don't know. So I can't ask you a question
Yeah.
that you don't know. So we need to do some education and action steps, setting goals. Of course, the ultimate goal is, choosing the job, finding the job. But what are the smaller goals so we can feel accomplished? Um, and yeah, I think that, just having, somebody that is, again, non-biased to have that
Yeah.
conversation with, and understanding that, myself and I have another coach, both neurodivergent. So there's some ease and tension of, am I talking to somebody who's neurotypical, and do I have to kind of mask here?
Yeah. Are there, so you're saying like you kind of breaking it down into smaller steps or smaller goals. So like, let's say there's somebody in there, like, because a lot of the listeners of Wise Squirrels are sort of mid-aged or older, who have had some career or a career or careers, um, and who are now like at that crossroads, kind of deciding what to do next, or deciding they want to make a change. So if they come to you, what are some of those steps you take them through? You mentioned like an assessment. Like I always recommend, I have it on Wise Squirrels too, like Ikigai. And I love that exercise for soul searching and kind of
Yeah.
defining and determining some of the things that you love to do, and that you're passionate about and that you're good at, and that, the world will pay you for. Because obviously, we can't all be Mother Teresa. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, tell me about some of those steps in order to help folks. So if somebody's listening right now and they're like, man, I'm fed up with my job, or maybe I've just been laid off, or maybe whatever, and they're thinking, okay, it's time for a change. What are some of the steps that you would take them through?
Yeah, definitely. So that non-negotiable for sure, like talking about things like, you know, what, like the task, I guess. So that would be one piece. But we're also, we can do an assessment. The assessment that I like to do is, we do the Enneagram, and that can, give you some options. But we also want to take this test in a way that we're answering the questions in the right way, of this is the job that I want, and not like a hobby type of thing. So that's something we go through, and this is just a piece of the puzzle. I really like to get into, let's do research on these different jobs. And there's different ways to do research, like informational interviewing. There's, you know, watching videos online about, all right, somebody telling me, how do I do this job? Or, if it's a more physical job, maybe you can see the step-by-step process. You can shadow people. I have a recruitment background, so, I can give some education on what those jobs entail, what those salaries are. We also talk about finances. What can you afford? If you are switching careers, you might have to take a pay cut. And is that something, you can do right now? How much can you afford? So,
Yeah.
going through all those steps of, what does that cash flow look like? Can you do that? I think there's, a bigger picture too. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I'm a 486 for Enneagram.
Nice.
So I always have to look it up, but I'm like 4 is idealist, 8
Yeah.
is challenger, and then 6 is loyalist. So I've got all my Myers-Briggs and DISC and predictive index and all the others all in one document. And then I have strategies that I take some clients through. And I also have a presentation and training idea called the Root Down, which helps people know themselves better, respect themselves, and then connect themselves. And so it's sort of a 3-part presentation and workshop for audiences, which I'm absolutely passionate about. And the thread line for that presentation and training is actually it's about my ADHD and my late diagnosis. But of course, as you know, like Enneagram and all these other exercises and assessments can all be done for anybody, regardless of their neurotype. So
Yeah, definitely. I'm a 2 for the Enneagram, so I'm a
what's
helper.
the 2? Helper? Yeah.
Helper.
Yeah. That's
it
awesome.
fits. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I love personality assessments and Strengths Finder and all these things. I always add the caveat, because every scientist listening will say, well, hold on. And I'm always like, okay, they're unscientific. However, what I like about them is they can remind you of your strengths when you're not really fully self-aware or fully aware enough about what you're good at or what your personality is like. So these assessments can help kind of, bring some clarity to the areas that you're best at and not as good at too. So you can, depending on the assessment, you can learn your strengths and your weaknesses. And so, yeah, that's part of the reason why I like them so much. So sometimes when I do them, I'm like, well, duh, yeah, these answers make complete sense. Like I think it's my DISC. Communication is my number one thing, right? And consistency, and that makes complete sense, right? So a lot of it is like you do these assessments and you're like, yeah, that makes sense, but it also helps remind you of your strengths, and depending on the assessment or the coach you're working with, you can help guide them based on their strengths. So say like, look, because you're, my Myers-Briggs is ENFJ, right? So extroverted, intuitive, feeling, and judging, right? Judging. So I'm a people person. I love being out networking, and I'm an extrovert, much to my wife's chagrin. And I drive her crazy. So, I know myself that like when I'm sitting alone at home all day working, it's not always the best thing for me. I need to be either doing this right now, talking to you, or actually out in real life, like actually like, high-fiving somebody in the flesh, So anyway, I totally went on a rant there. What are your thoughts on all that? I just gave you a bunch of verbal diarrhea. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Hey, this is Dr. George Sachs, co-founder of Inflow, a proud sponsor of Wise Squirrels. If you have ADHD, you know how tough it can be to stay on top of, well, mostly everything. That's why we created Inflow, an app designed by expert clinicians and people with ADHD to help you understand your brain, build habits that actually stick, and feel less alone in the process. Get the support you need with Inflow. Head to wisesquirrels.com/inflow to check it out.
I agree. I think that understanding your strengths with these assessments can be really helpful for your career and, setting yourself up for success and seeing, what are the challenges, because I think, a lot of the people that I work with, they're not really sure what their strengths are versus weaknesses, or, they have an idea, but once you start diving into that and then the career you want to pivot to, you can align that better.
Yeah, and you mentioned informational interviews, and I think that's such solid advice. I wrote a book years ago called New Business Networking, and in it I wrote about what actually some of the stuff that I did, and this works better for younger people typically, but not every. I mean, anybody can use techniques like this, but the one I love, and as I said, I did this was when I was younger. And a student, I just graduated and I was looking for a job. So I cold called the leaders of companies or departments, or I was looking for starting a role in marketing and promotions, and said basically, hi, I'm Dave Delaney, I'm a student, or a newly graduated student. That always helps.
Yeah.
Because then they're like, okay, the guy's not going to sell me something. He's not coming in to try to sell me something. And you say, I would love to meet with you for 10 minutes of your time. I'll even buy you a coffee just to learn more about the industry. And that's kind of the message. And 9 times out of 10, the person will say, yeah, sure, come on in. And you come in. But as I instruct people, I always say, like, in the book, I talk about like bringing the coffee with you. So you bring the coffee with the stir stick, with the creamer, with the sugar, all that stuff. So that, and then, most of the time they're in the office. So they have like a coffee maker and they're shocked. They're like, whoa, I didn't expect you to actually bring the coffee. And you're like, oh, I'm a person of my word. And you bring the coffee. But what happens from this is that you're leaving something tangible. And especially in this day and age when everything's digital, you're leaving something tangible. So it's not just your follow-up email after to thank them and so on, but you're actually you're giving them a coffee. So when you leave, that coffee cup might be on their desk for the next day or days, depending how often they clean off their desk, I guess.
Yeah.
It could even be on the desk for a week. And every time they look at that coffee cup, they're going to be reminded of you. And I think that's such a good strategy of, and you're not being sneaky or anything. You're genuinely bringing them a coffee, right? But you're also showing that you're a person of your word. What do you think about that crazy strategy?
I think that's awesome. I think that's genius because they're now reminded of you more often after you leave. So they're thinking about you. And if there's anything that maybe you've asked in the interview or things that they could follow up with you or potentially find a job, that's a really good impression to leave.
Yeah. And also when you're, another way I did this was moving to Nashville from Toronto because I didn't really know anybody in this city when I moved here. And so I did the same sort of thing, basically cold calling people. And luckily I'm in, a city where people are very nice and friendly. And again, most people said, sure. And instead of saying I'm a student, I just said, I'm a marketing professional, but I'm new to Nashville and I would love to just meet with you and get the lay of the land kind of thing. But the deal is that like when you're going to these informational coffees, you're not there to like sell anything except yourself, perhaps. So you're not saying, hey, by the way, I'm really looking for a job. You're going there to impress them so that, and to let them do the bulk of the talking, right? By using active listening. And then when they, as you're speaking, they might say, are you looking for a job? And that's when you can say, heck yeah. But the other thing you can say at the end, which I always recommend is, by the way, before I go, is there somebody else in the industry you think I should meet? And then ask them for an introduction to that person. Would you mind like emailing us just a quick connecting us? That way I can follow up directly with that person. And, hopefully they say yes. And then, there's some strategies I use for reminding people through email and stuff, but that way you're broadening your network now in a new community or a different industry with new people and somebody who is known or a veteran in that industry is introducing you to someone else in that industry. And that's another way to kind of open doors. But taking a step back for a sec, what about like, this is assuming what industry or what job you should be going out after, right? So it's hard to set up informational coffees or informational meetings without knowing who to call. You can't just reach out to everybody willy-nilly. So
Right.
any ideas and tips on trying to define, let's say somebody mid-career instead of a younger person, like a college kid or something, or college person.
Yeah.
I now have one college person and another one soon. So
Yeah.
kids. What are your thoughts on that? Like later in life, you're evaluating your career, you're thinking of like a new direction. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great to reach out. Like if you have phone numbers, that's awesome. I think it's also great, you can message people on LinkedIn, but it's more about them and learning from them. And talking about, your background is very amazing to me. I like XYZ. I would love to, you know, improve my career, and I'd love to know how you got to where you are. Is there any way I can pick your brain and learn more from you? Type of conversation where, like you said, we're not asking for a job, we are learning from them. And how I kind of explain it is that most people like helping people, and most people like talking about themselves. So
Yeah.
That's a good thing to keep in mind, because I feel like a lot of people are hesitant to ask for help or to reach out to people unless you're a people person and you enjoy doing that. Just having that conversation of, it's okay to reach out, and if they say no or if they don't answer you, they're probably just busy. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't let the rejection sensitive dysphoria kick in and kick you in the butt. That makes sense. I was thinking of a question that popped in my head there as you were talking about that. So for folks that are applying to a job, let's say nowadays, I keep saying nowadays, I'm totally dating myself. Nowadays, when I was a kid, it only cost a nickel.
Yep, I do that
hey,
too.
You kids, get off my lawn. But I was thinking, as you're going through now, especially digitally, you're applying online a lot of the time. Now the stats are like, it's something, I don't know the actual number, but it's something like 75% of the jobs out there are not listed. So it's really who you know, which is why networking is such an important piece of this. But let's assume you're applying to a job online, and you get to that dreaded question: do you have disability? And you have the answers. Unfortunately, usually these things force you to answer. So you can either say yes, no, or, I prefer not to answer. And what are your thoughts now? Obviously disability is a term that, I'm well aware is questionable at best. However, ADHD is listed as one of those air quote, disabilities. What are your, and I'm not talking about for being embarrassed or ashamed of having ADHD. I mean, I started this podcast because, I wanted people to know about my ADHD because I want others to embrace their own. But of course, it's up to everybody individually, and there's always there could be reasons why you don't want to disclose this. So, what are your thoughts on that dreaded question, and what somebody should do when they reach that?
So, are you talking about like when you're filling out the form, right?
Yes.
And it's a checkbox. Okay. So those forms sometimes aren't even seen by recruiters. So it can be for different reasons. It can be that they're trying to pull stats of, what that looks like. Some companies they'll get a tax write-off for hiring a certain amount of people who are disabled. So, who I am as well. I shout it from the rooftops. You can see it all over my LinkedIn. I'm dyslexic, I have ADHD. It's something I'm proud of. It's just a checkbox. It shouldn't have, like, being a recruiter too, it doesn't have a sway in, when I was a recruiter, you couldn't see that. It wasn't something we were looking at, and it's, of course, illegal to discriminate. But, if we're, checking if you're talking about your disability, that's a different question of how do we do this, and talk about our strengths, rather than going into, I'm really bad at this, I'm really bad at that. You want to present it in a positive light. And, if you're having challenges, this is what I need, because, this sometimes is a little bit harder for me, but here's how I work with this.
So this is assuming that you've gotten to the interview process part, right? I think the challenge is often that you do get to that part of the online application, and with full awareness, of course, that it is illegal to discriminate. And even, for the applicant, they don't know whether the recruiter or whoever's seeing the information. But I think it is something that I see a lot of people talk about, which is, they don't know how to answer that question, because, if you say yes, you're not saying ADHD, you're just saying, yes, I have a disability.
Yeah.
And so if that, one could assume that somebody could discriminate, even though it's illegal. People break the law all the time. So they could think, well, I'm not hiring this person, they're crazy. Or whatever, right? So they could discriminate, but if you say no, then if you get the job, then you might want to get accommodations, or at least ask for accommodations that may be problematic at that point because you said no. And if you say, I prefer not to answer, like if I was a recruiter and saw that answer, and I don't care about discriminating anyone, if they say I prefer not to answer, that would tell me that they probably do. So what is your advice in that situation for somebody applying? I know it's tough, but
it's a tough question. It's really, I think it's what you're comfortable with, honestly, because if you're going to have a conversation, if you are going to, because it is a broad question, right? Because you could be disabled for something completely different and they don't know that. Right. So that's, completely up to you, because if you want to talk about that, if you're open to that, and that's going to be a conversation you're going to have, you can definitely check it off. You can check off, you can even skip it. I don't even think you need to.
I think some of them force you to do it. Right.
Okay.
So some of the applications force you to do it. Sometimes if I'm talking to someone about it, I'll just say that, if you're not sure, I think it might be best. Again, this is sort of anecdotal, right? It's a tough question, but I was curious what your thoughts were. Is to say, I prefer not to answer, but then in order to be, it's a weird thing, right? Because if you say, I prefer not to answer that question, then what I would recommend, if you do that, is to say, I prefer not to answer all of the other questions about whether you're a veteran, whether you're, whatever, race, gender, sexuality, all these things that might come up. Just, I prefer not to answer on all of them. But then almost like, to me, that might tell the recruiter, this person's going to be like, causing a big ruckus about all these things, right? So then it's again, it's such a it's a real difficult, it's really a difficult thing. And I wish there were answers. And of course, we know discrimination is illegal, and we know that maybe in the job or the company that you're looking for, finding companies that do hire neurodivergent people, because Google was a client for about 6 years. So I did a lot of work with Google, and I know, and I've done a lot of work in the tech space. So I know, certainly a lot of tech companies actually now actively recruit neurodivergent people, and they do so not to tick a box, but instead they see the value. So I think IBM, and I know Microsoft also, and there are probably many more that actually have departments specifically for folks. So I think because they understand that, if you love coding and you get hyper focused on problem solving with code, we want you to be really happy and go for it, right? Because, and again, I'm generalizing here, but anyway, what about like navigating the job market these days, where things are sort of topsy-turvy or completely upside down, depending. What are you what are your thoughts on getting out there and getting a job? Do you think, like, what are some tips on, let's say you've done the assessments, you've got a clear idea on some ideas of the industries and the jobs you want to do. What are the next steps, you think?
So there's statistics that 85% of people get hired knew somebody, whether they reached out to them, they were family, friends, previous coworkers. Networking is the top way to find a job right now. And it can be really hard for people who are neurodivergent or have trouble with, have social anxiety. But putting yourself out there and making connections. I always say that, recruiters and managers are people too. And the number one thing when I was a recruiter is the manager said, well, I just didn't connect with them. They could have had all the, skills, experience in the world, and they would say, just didn't connect. Yeah. So that connection piece is really important. And if that is hard for you, you want to talk about, I have people talk in the beginning of their interview saying, emotions sometimes can be hard to show, and that's what managers want to see. But, saying, hey, I'm really excited about this position. I, just wanted to let you know that I'm, thanks for letting me be here. But, sometimes it's, I'm a little nervous and, it's hard for me to show my emotion, my enthusiasm, but I just want to know, like, I'm so excited. So that kind of breaks the tension where they get a little bit of empathy for you. They understand that you're trying to talk about this. So that connection piece can be really good at breaking the ice. I would say the networking, connection, and then just getting the interview. You have to have the right resume. You have to have it the right keywords too. You have AI now. If the recruiter's looking at it, they're only looking at it for 7 seconds. So you want to make sure it looks crisp and ready to go. You have all keywords in there. So
yeah, that's a good tip. Yeah, because I did a lot of work with Google and I've worked in digital marketing for so long. I always say I'm a recovering marketer. I know enough. I know enough about SEO, search engine optimization, and yeah, you raised a really important point there, which is like, focusing on the skills that are in your resume, like even using the language in your resume, not like different language like English, French, etc., but using the kind of tone and style of the actual job listing, and then honing the descriptions of your skills or accomplishments, weaving in those keywords that they're looking for, so that when you apply online, I mean, I don't know the inner workings of Indeed or how its algorithm works or LinkedIn or whatever, but I'm smart enough to know that their algorithms are looking for these keywords to raise your resume or cover letter to the top of the heap or the top of the pile. So yeah, that's a really important point. You mentioned AI. Are you doing stuff with AI so far?
Or? So I have people, so I recommend certain like AI tools for people to use. So, ChatGPT is very helpful. Text to speech, speech to text, things like that can cut time and also help you with articulating what you want to say, whether it's answering a question or coming up with questions, or I go through job descriptions with my clients, and sometimes they say, well, I don't qualify for this position. This doesn't make sense. And I take the wording and I put it in ChatGPT and I say, please simplify this. And it spits it out. And she's like, oh, I do that. That's exactly what I do.
Yeah, that's
So
amazing.
it's funny how the language can be misinterpreted. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, and especially, I mentioned tech, especially in that industry, the names of different things change over time. So like, if I date myself here, like most recently, like we'll say social media, right? And so let's, if you talk about social media, you could be talking about Facebook, let's say. But go back a little bit, we were talking about social networks and social networking. Now it's all just social media. But if you go back further, then you're talking about like blogs. And if you go back further, you're talking about web blogs. And if you go back further, you're talking about forums. And go back further, you're talking about like bulletin board systems, BBSs, back before the internet, when you were dialing into computers. And now I'm like, getting prehistoric, so I'll shut up. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the language does change in depending on, or different industries will use, they all hire an HR manager or HR director, but it may be human resources, VP of HR, or it may be chief people officer, or it may be like, there's all these different terms, right? So yeah, that's a good point of maybe using ChatGPT to research the industry and the job titles that best suit that industry. I'm often curious where our listeners are on their knowledge of AI, because I do like training and workshops and things about using AI. And I actually just finished reading, although I kind of wish I didn't. I just read, I loved it. Yuval Navarri's book, Nexus, which is, it's an epic book. It's huge, but it's amazing. He wrote Sapiens as well. And Nexus is like, it's about information. And he goes right back to like the beginning of time, basically, or the beginning of humans at least, and how we communicated, through storytelling over fires, right? And then we learned to like draw etchings and then etch into like tablets and then the Gutenberg press, or we created paper and started writing on paper, the Gutenberg press and sort of the history of information, right up to artificial intelligence, which he calls alien intelligence. And he makes he urges people to think of AI tools not as tools, but AI as AI agents, because for the first time in human history, we're using these agents that can actually almost like think and approach things differently and problem solve differently. You use like Google to search something, and Google's algorithm will give you the best results but Google works by indexing the entire internet. It removes some of the stuff that you don't want to find, or stuff on the dark web or whatever, and then Google indexes what it thinks are the best options, but those are the options. They're not with AI. So that's like a tool, but an agent will say, here are some options, but actually if you do it this way, why don't you try it this way instead? I have another approach. Why don't you do it this way? Yeah. So it's actually providing solutions and unique approaches to things. And so no spoiler alert, but it'll be hard to sleep after you finish that book, because it's
great.
The future is it's interesting.
I understand.
What are some things I haven't asked you about as it pertains to careers and job search for ADHDers?
Let's see. So I think that, a good question or things to talk about is, maybe how I help my clients or some stories. So I had a client, and I'll have conversations, of course, with them before they start, and tell me about yourself, what's going on, and I'm on a video call with this person, and you can tell she's distraught. She just got fired, and she's in tears, and I remember the feeling when I got fired twice. And it is hard, and she's crying, and I'm trying not to cry, and she's because I can feel her pain. I'm very empathetic, and we're having this conversation, and she ends up signing up, and she was able, like, we worked together for 8 weeks, and she found a job. And typically it takes a little bit longer than that, but she really, like, it. She has ADHD, and I think it really comes down to, we need somebody who believes in us. We need somebody who understands, what's going on, and being able to relate to her of being fired and you don't feel good enough, or you did something wrong, and you can't dig your way out of it, can be really, really, taxing, mobilizing. There's fear, you can't provide financially like you did. So, being able to be that accountability person for that person, really, really, it's a great feeling for me, but I'm so glad I was able to help her. And I actually had a similar experience. So, I get to be the same person as my mentor was to me, where I had gotten fired from a position that was very, very toxic, and I didn't know how to advocate for myself. I didn't know I had ADHD at the time, and it was probably a blessing. But I was fired after 3 months. I ended up getting hired for this position. I wasn't sure if I wanted it, and I walked in, to the interview just like, all right, let's see how this goes, which was probably the best thing ever because I got the job, and the the culture was amazing. My boss is awesome, but my executive functioning was malfunctioning. And I remember my boss, pulling me into the office, and I'm like, he's going to fire me. And he says, Jess, I don't know what's going on. I think I'm going to have to let you go. And I burst into tears, and I say, I have dyslexia. I'm sorry. Like, I can't figure XYZ out. He's like, all right, Jess, we're going to work together on this. And he helps me with, it sounds like simple things, but for me back then, it was, put things on your calendar, make sure everything's on there. Let's manage your time. Where are you spending your time? Right. And knowing that he knew my secret, that I was neurodivergent, he didn't care. He wanted to help me. And that builded our bond where I could go to him. He knew the amount of space I needed to do my job because I didn't need micromanaging. I would, it would mess me up. And I was able to make 6 figures in that company, and he still helps me today in my business.
Oh, that's great.
So I have like a great passion for this, and I'm able to do that for my clients now, where it's, managing your job, finding a job, whatever it is. And I just am very passionate about it.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great for the woman client that you had, without divulging too any personal information, of course, but like, not that you would. Were there some specific strategies that you did with her that worked well?
Yeah. So she, needed the confidence in, the interviewing strategy. She was very good at talking to people, things like that, but just having the confidence in what she needed to say. So, she went for marketing, and, healthcare. So, what are the key things in those industries or that job that you needed to talk about? How did you need to follow up? What are the specific, questions that are going to be asked? And how do we answer that? Also, how do we not, what are things that we don't say as well? Because that can be tricky, with giving too much information or, knowing when to stop talking. And even, the communication piece where, having that good dialogue of when you're working with your manager. So I've had another person who, they want to tell all the things, right? They want to tell them the whole story and how you got there, where you went, where you're going. But, the manager is like, all right, just tell me the goal and what's next, or, what you completed, the structure, like what do I need in this from my manager to complete, my responsibilities. So it's kind of having that conversation. What are the expectations? How to have that conversation. Yeah.
Do you have tips for folks who, and I think this is probably pretty common, although, no two ADHDers, wise squirrels are the same, but we do tend to talk a lot. Any tips on, I have my own around using active listening and I have my own thoughts on this, but I'm curious your approach to, hey, Jess, I've got this interview. I'm so excited. I'm scared I'm going to just keep talking because I'm nervous and I talk a lot.
Yeah.
What do I do?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different things. So I always have people have like a notepad, piece of paper, pen out. So when you're having these conversations, it's hard not to jump in and say X, Y, Z. So I write down, I say, hey, write down a bullet point of something you want to circle back to and, or, elaborate on, because really want to actively listening, like you said, but you're able to just jot down that one word and leave it and glance down after, can be helpful. Another thing is, just asking, like, hey, did I answer everything there? Or, would you like me to elaborate? Is there something else you'd like me to touch upon? I think also practicing interviewing every day and practicing it in the mirror, practicing it with other people, like seeing your expression, what your face looks like. You can time yourself too on your responses. Like, how long did it take you? Were you talking for like, a couple of minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes on the same subject, type of thing?
Yeah, that's great advice. I love the notebook too, because that notebook idea is smart also for the reason why you explained, of course, but also it makes the interviewer think, or interviewers think that like you really are keen about the position, right? Like if you're taking notes, that's a great sign that you're taking this seriously and that you really are considering it. And also to that point, it's important to remember, and if you are nervous in an interview, to remember that you are also interviewing them.
Yes.
Right? Like it's not, 100%. I mean, they will be lucky to hire you.
Yes.
They will be so blessed to hire you. But so it's also you determining whether this is somewhere you want to work. Right. So
yes, exactly. So when we talk about the non-negotiables, I take those questions and we're going to ask your manager. And, one of the questions like I talk about is, you want to ask that manager, how do they work with their employees? And not just how do they work, like give me examples. Like we want to expand. And we want to actively listen. Like, what are they saying? Are there any red flags in there? Are they actually answering your question, or are they kind of going around it, type of thing?
That's great. Jess, This has been awesome, and I really do appreciate your insights and time. How can folks get a hold of you, learn more about what you do, and maybe schedule a session?
Yeah, so you can go to my website. It's jessjarmo.com, jessjarmo.com. I have information on there. You could book a call and learn more there. So yeah, that would be great. Thank
Awesome.
you. I appreciate your time, and I really enjoyed chatting with you too.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. This has been great.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to Wise Squirrels. Please make sure you follow the show so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed the show, leave a review, please, and visit wisesquirrels.com/love for bonus content, audio comments that you can leave, membership information, free coaching, sponsorship details, booking information, and much more. Drop by wisesquirrels.com/love. Check out the link in the episode description below and explore now. Thanks again for listening.
Hey, this is Dr. George Sachs, co-founder of Inflow, a proud sponsor of Wise Squirrels. If you have ADHD, you know how tough it can be to stay on top of, mostly everything. That's why we created Inflow, an app designed by expert clinicians and people with ADHD to help you understand your brain, build habits that actually stick, and feel less alone in the process. Get the support you need with Inflow. Head to wisesquirrels.com/inflow to check it out.